Actually just decided to work out number one in the homework. So this is just kind of a free question. Hopefully this video helps. I'm going to assume you've already read the problem. So Jenny needs to build a box that has a square base and a volume of 900 centimeters cubed. The height of the box is related to the length of one side by this function. So what happens is the box is going to have a certain volume. So that's set in stone. But if it has a different side, so for example, if it has really long sides, then it might require a very short height in order to keep the volume 900 centimeters, right? It has to have a volume of 900 centimeters. So anytime you have big sides, you're going to have a big base, and so in order to balance it out, you need a small height. Or if you have a small sides for the base, so the base is pretty small, in order to get that 900 volume, you're going to need a pretty large height to go with that. So the height and the side lengths of the base, so these are our sides, and this is our height. Our height and our sides have to balance out so that we always have 900 as a total. So 900 is a fixed amount. And then how this works is the bigger the sides are, the smaller the height ends up being. And the smaller the sides are, the bigger the height ends up being. That's an explanation of what's going on geometrically. It's not actually necessary for this problem to kind of understand why this function works. But I did want to point it out. Let's do the problem itself. Find h of 10. So what h of 10 means, if you have a value inside the parentheses, what that means is that gets plugged in everywhere you see an s. So h of 10 means you plug in 10 for s. 900 over 10 squared. Now we can simplify this by hand. It works out pretty easy. This is 900 divided by 100, which is 9. So just h of 10, right, that's function notation. Whatever's inside the parentheses should be plugged in for the independent variable, in this case s. What does this tell you about the box? So anytime we have to explain meaning for function notation, we can always use the words if, and then followed by then. And then just fill in the kind of key terms. In this case, if, well, 10. If the sides are 10 centimeters, then the height of the box will be 9 centimeters. And that's all there is to it, right? Describe what this number means, it's the side, and describe what this number means, it's the height. If the sides are 10, then the height of the box is 9, and that'll balance it out so that the overall volume of the box is 900 centimeters. B says, what values of s satisfy the equation 100 equals h of s? So this was function notation, and here's function notation again. What's different this time is it's not 100 that we're plugging in parentheses. We don't know what s is, but we do know the total is 100. So we take our function, where we still don't know s, we substitute in 100, and we solve. So anytime it says the function equals, you write out your function and then equals the value, and now we're going to solve for s. First thing we're going to do is multiply on both sides. So we're going to get rid of this by multiplying by s squared. And then over here we're going to multiply by s squared. What we wind up with is 900 equals 100 s squared. Now we're trying to solve for s, so we're going to get rid of 100 with division and divide by 100. And what we're going to get is 900 divided by 100, 9 equals s squared. So we got one step left, which is to solve. We want to get rid of squared, so we do the opposite of squared, which is square root. So we're going to do square root s squared. And then when you square root both sides of an equation, what you have to use is plus or minus, because technically there's two answers to this. 3 times 3 is 9, but also negative 3 times negative 3 is also 9. So that's what the plus or minus is for. And what we get is our solutions s equals 3 or s equals negative 3. Let's go back and look at this question here. I think this will probably this question makes sense now. Do all your solutions make sense? Well, yeah, it makes sense to have a box of 3 centimeters. That's not a mind-blowing thing. However, you cannot have a negative 3 centimeter box. So this value does not make sense. Box length can't be negative. And you can really write that in a few different ways. But just make sure you identify s equals negative 3 doesn't make sense. And the reason is some things can be negative. Temperature can be negative. Or my bank account can be negative. However, something like a length cannot be a negative value, so it doesn't make sense in context. C says describe the theoretical domain and range for h of s. So domain is always the independent variable, so it's s, and then the range is the height, or the h of s. So let's think about what makes sense. It does not make sense to have a negative side. Also, it doesn't make sense to have a side of 0. Just like you can't have negative length, you also couldn't build a box with 0 length. So for our theoretical domain and our theoretical range, S can be all real numbers. And we have our symbol for real numbers. All real numbers, S not equal to 0. So theoretically, we could plug in any number we wanted. You can plug in a positive number, you can plug in a negative number. The only thing you can't plug in is 0 because you'll divide by 0. So theoretically, all numbers are fine except 0. And then our range is also all real numbers. But not only can we not plug in 0, we'll also never get 0 as a result. So h of s not equal to 0. Practically, though, really, we can't plug in a negative number, so our practical domain is s has to be greater than 0. It's impossible to have a negative box length. And it's also going to be impossible to have a negative box height. So h of s greater than 0 is our practical range. Okay, so that's question 1. The most important things to take away from question 1 is when you see this symbol h of 10, it means you plug in 10 for s. When you see h of s equals 100, it means you don't plug in 100. You write out the equation, you write equals 100, and then you work backwards to solve. That's the two main things I wanted to review with this question. Also, theoretical means like mathematically what's possible, and then practical means realistically what's possible. Mathematically, there's a lot of numbers we can plug into this. All numbers except 0 we can plug into this equation. Practically, it would never make sense to have a negative side. So our practical domain is s has to be greater than 0, or s has to be positive. All right, so that's question 1. Go ahead and look at question 2 in the next video. Flagged.